Okay, so we're up to Siman Nun Gimel Sif Yotes, a very interesting Sif, and it deals with what to do if you don't like the Chazan. Can you protest against his appointment? What to do about these sort of things. Says the Mechaber, just to begin with, Yesh Moinim Ger Melios Shliach Tzibur V'Nitchu Divreihem. Some people, there are those who want to say that you can prevent a ger, a convert, from being a Bal Tefillah, a Shliach Tzibur. However, that view is pushed away. Says the Mishnah Berurah on that in Sif Mem Tes, Melios Shliach Tzibur, Lefi Shelo Yuchel Loimar Elokei Avosenu, because he is unable to say Elokei Avosenu. He converted into Yiddishkeit, and therefore he cannot say that. Avol Kashul Mispalel Beino Levein Atzmo Yom Elokei Avos Yisrael. But we don't take that view on board, because Nidchu Divreihem, says in Mishnah Berurah in Sif Kotan Nun, Tu Yochel Lema Gamkein Elokei Avosenu. He is allowed to say that. Why? The Avraham Nikra Av Hamoin Goyim, because Avraham Avinu, who he is called the father of all nations, K'dichsiv Ki Av Hamoin V'Gomer, because he taught the entire world monotheism, belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore a ger is entitled to say that, and therefore he can be a Bal Tefillah. Shliach Tzibur Mamzer, regarding a Shliach Tzibur who is a Mamzer, that means he is born from a forbidden relationship, which is a Chiyuv Kores. There are different pshatim what exactly is a Mamzer, but that's the standard one. And therefore, for example, a child born from an ancestral relationship, or an Eishes Ish, or something like that, a person who is a known Mamzer, Shliach Tzibur Mamzer, Tolu b'machlokas in Mamzer kosher lichtov tefillin. It depends on whether or not can he be a Shliach Tzibur. Well, it depends on the machlokas. It's subject to the same machlokas of whether or not a mamzer can write tefillin. Kosuv b'shir knesset agdola. Lefizeh, and therefore, lemogin Avraham b'siman lamtes shekosuv b'shem amor hadarkei Moshe t'muter lichtov tefillin muter li Shliach Tzibur. According to that Mogen Avraham, that according to the darkei Moshe, that the opinion which says that a mamzer is allowed to write tefillin, he would also be allowed to be a Shliach Tzibur. Omnom b'sefer Birkei Yosef. B'Yeridea Reish Pei Aleph Masik the Shliach Tzibur Lo Yiyeh, that he should not be a Bal Tefillah. Tefillin Shekosav Kasherim, and the tefillin that he writes are kosher. If you take a look, two interesting notes. Number 57, V'Leshamish Kashatz B'Yom Neroim, for the Shliach Tzibur, who is a mamzer, to be the Bal Tefillah, to be the Chazan over the Yom Neroim, Kosuv Ha'alef L'Mogein on the Mat Ephraim, She'af She'kol Hashona Yesh Mekilim B'zeh, even though throughout the year there are lenient opinions, as we just said, Mikol Mokum B'Yom Neroim Yesh Lahachmir L'Chol Hades. Even those opinions which say the mamzer can be a Chazan the rest of the year, it's one should avoid that on the Yom Neroim. Mishum Sonui Hu L'Tzibur Shemisha Osolav B'Kal Hashem Yesh Shatz B'Yom HaMishpat. It seems a little bit incongruous that someone who is a mamzer and is considered, it's a ganai, ganai for the tzibur. It's a sort of a disgrace for the tzibur that he is the one representing the tzibur, someone who is as a mamzer. And therefore says the Aleph Lamate, the Aleph HaMogin, on the Mat Ephraim, that not during the Yom Neroim, even for those who allow him during the rest of the year. Now in footnote 58 he adds, for the opinion which says that a mamzer should not be a Shliach Tzibur, the Orach HaShulchan writes, because he's noled be'issa, ein royu she'yeh sanegar. It's inappropriate that he should be a defendant, defending the Jewish people, sort of standing there being an advocate on our behalf. V'hoisiv, and therefore he adds, shemitam zeh hu hadin shegam cholol lo yeshatz. That applies to a cholol as well. A cholol is someone who is also born from a forbidden relationship. In this case, a cholol is born from a kohen who marries a grusha or a chalutza, and the child produced is a cholol. So the same svara would apply. So therefore there are two days, as the Mishnah Berurah brings down. Okay, let's continue the Mechaber. Afilu yochid yochel la'akev v'lomar eini roitze sheploni chazan, and even an individual can protest and say, I don't want so and so to be the chazan, im lo shekva hiskim alav mitchila, unless they agreed that beforehand. Says the Ramah, v'davka she'yeh lo'ise yochid tam hogan. When can an individual protest against the chazan being the chazan? Only if he has a reasonable reason for it. It's not just that it's just arbitrary. Al pitove ho'eh, that according to the committee of the shul. But aside from that, an individual is not allowed to protest against a Shliach Tzibur. Okay, let's do the Mishnah Berurah up till there. The first one is Sif Kotan Nun Aleph. Yochel La'akev. So the Mechaber said even a Yochid is able to protest, an individual is able to protest against the appointment of a certain chazan, yochel akev, be'es haismanus. Now it's talking about at the time of the appointment. The reason is that the tefillas are instituted in lieu, instead of the karbonos, the daily karbonos, and all of the Jewish people have a chelek in these daily offerings, and therefore you can't offer up an offering against someone's will, and therefore he's got to be on board. Unless he this was agreed beforehand. Because once the person was appointed, then an individual and even a minority in the shul up to half are not able to protest to remove that chazan. Even if they want to pay him out and complete his country has a contractual entitlements, and even if you want to say, well, look, we'll pay you out, they cannot force that. Because the chazan's done nothing wrong. If he falls out of favor with the minority of the tzibur, that's just too bad. But if the majority of the tzibur want to, they are able to remove him if they pay out his contractual entitlements. And nowadays, the only people who are able to remove him are the Shiva Tovei Ha'eh. The Shiva Tovei Ha'eh means literally the 7 good people of the community, and it's some form of committee who run the town. So I suppose the most common parallel nowadays would be the board of management, a committee that runs the shul, or some sort of selected individuals, appointed individuals who run the shul. Kol makom u'makom l'fi takana, every single place according to their takana. Okay, continuing the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot Nun Beis. And they say any rights ploni chazan, says the Mishnah Berurah, v'davka sheyesh shliach tzibur acher. Now when can they protest? If there is another person who's going to be the shliach tzibur, sheyuchlu hakal askir b'damav, they can hire him they can pay him. But if there is no, you can't just fire the chazan if there's no one else to stand there. Or if it's going to be more expensive, the kahal can say, look, we don't have to dig into our pockets to increase the pay. If this individual doesn't want the person to be the chazan, again at the time of the appointment, so then the Mechaber said he's entitled to be ma'akev. He can actually prevent that person's appointment. And if already there's some sort of contractual obligations towards him, Yosef Mishelo, if that individual wants to, then he'll have to pay the extra amount that may be. Even if it turns out his argument is that the second chazan is superior to the first, keneged tosefes hadomim, at the end of the day, if it's going to cost the tzibur, the community, more money, even if the second person is superior, then the tzibur are entitled to say, we're not forking out, we're not paying extra money just to get a new chazan. Sheploni ye chazan. This is going on the Mechaber still, that a yochid is able to be ma'akev, is able to put his foot down and say, I don't want so-and-so to be the chazan. Sheploni ye chazan, says the Mishnah Berurah in Sivkot Nun Gimel, hu adin b'chol hamnuyin yochel limchos. It's not just the chazan, it's any appointed person from the shul is able to protest. Afilu b'chacham marbetz Torah, even someone who is a chacham who is giving shiurim, he's spreading Torah, tofes yeshiva, v'davka kasherotz lekabel acher. Only if they want to have another person instead of him. If he just stands up and protests, he doesn't want this guy to give shiurim and to be a marbetz Torah in the community, his protest is nothing. And even the miyut are able to be to subjugate larov to the rov. And even if they want to appoint somebody else, if the person that they want, the majority of the community agree, excuse me, do not fear, I made a bracha earlier. If the majority of the kahal agree that the second person is better, they still cannot protest against it. And it could be even a miyut are able lokuf larov to have oversway the majority to hire someone who is better. Now, kos v'achronim. This is very important. Shezeh hadin v'shulchan aruch The Shulchan Aruch hu dafka b'meim. This, the halacha of the Shulchan Aruch, that an individual can protest the appointment of a chazan, is specifically in those days, avol hayoim, but today, sheyodua, that is known, shabavenuseinu harabim, according to our many sins, harbe machazikin machlokas. Sadly, many people latch onto a machlokas, b'li tam v'reach, without any rationale. V'kavanosim shelo l'shem shemayim, and their intention is not altruistic, is not l'shem shemayim. Im hoyitzrichim nishol l'chol yochel v'yochel bin hamanuyim. If you're going to ask every individual about their view on the rabbi, on the chazan, or any appointee of the shul, beinin in minu hashatz, a marbitz Torah, whether it's the chazan, the rov, a marbitz Torah, v'av beistin, be'ir, v'chol ki agavna, lo yamaskim in the olam, there would never be consensus. Al kein holchin acharov peri hamas, and therefore you go after the majority of people who pay the dues, the membership or whatever of the shul, v'afilu psulik kurvik beineim, even if there are related people who are therefore invalids in normal cases of edus, they would be included. And nowadays the minhag is you follow the committee of the shul, they are the representation of the shul, and they can call the shots. Each one according to their own practice, according to their own specific rules and constitution. But the ikka is there should not be machlokas, and therefore you can't listen to an individual who is just protesting. The Magen Avraham gives another reason, that the halacha of the Shulchan Aruch, who says that an individual can protest against the appointment of a shliach tzibur, or wants to remove him, that's dafka bismanehim, that's dafka in those days, shliach tzibur moitzi rabbim yedei chevosim, that the shliach tzibur would be moitzi the rabbim mitfiloso, oz hayochid yochelakev, then an individual can protest. Because he can't be my shliach against my will if he's being moitzi me. But nowadays, individuals, thankfully, are able to read, they're articulate, they're educated, and rak hashliach tzibur hu lepiyutim, and the shliach tzibur is not being moitzi people who cannot read, because Baruch Hashem, people can read, and therefore the purpose, the function of the shliach tzibur is just to do the piyutim and other things. He's not being moitzi them, and therefore it's a totally different ball game. And says the Magen Avraham that that takes away the ability of an individual to protest. There's not so much concern about this. Okay, and then just finishing off the Mishnah Berurah. So from the outset, now a very interesting case. What if you accepted the chazan to be a chazan, let's say for a year, and then the year passed, that doesn't mean that, look, you've already agreed to appoint this fellow. No, the contract is out, and now they can reassess, and therefore it's considered like a new appointment. It's as if he wasn't there. Very interesting case. Reuven was hired to be the chazan, and he was there for a year. He was hired to be chazan for a year, and he completed his year. And he began to daven a little bit into the second year. And some of the people protested, and they said, look, enough, we don't want this chazan anymore. But he's already fulfilled his year. We don't want to hire him for a second year. And the shliach tzibur argues, since he already started at the beginning of the second year, probably Tishri, and therefore he began the Yom Neroim, and therefore I've started, and therefore it's as if you've hired me for the second year, and therefore you've got to pay me out for the whole year if you want me to go now. And therefore the din is with the shliach tzibur, and if the tzibur wants to get to remove the chazan a few weeks into the second year, they've got to pay out the whole of the second year. Okay, now let's press on. This is just the Mishnah Berurah on the Ramah. It says, he's got to have a reasonable rationale that he doesn't want this chazan. He puts forward some sort of reason that because of this, that this chazan is unacceptable. That he's got bad midas, but not to say that he's invalid in some way. He's got a problem with his lineage, his status. You can't, just one guy can't just stand up and say the guy's apostle. You need to, that needs to be thoroughly investigated. Now, let's carry on the Ramah. Interesting halachas and actually quite sad halachas. Says the Ramah, V'im hu sono, if this individual in the shul hates the Chazan, then he's able to protest before the Chazan is appointed. And someone who hates the Shliach Tzibur, he shouldn't get an aliyah at the time when they're reading a Teichacha, and the concern is that the Shliach Tzibur, which means the Balkora, might direct the words of the Teichacha to that person who he hates, who's getting the aliyah, and it could be dangerous for him. We'll see that more about this in a moment. So let's just do the Mishnah Berurah on there. Sifkat Nun Vav Soinoi Rotzoloma Sheyodua be'emes mikvar sheim soinim zer lezeh. It's some, they know this is an ongoing feud between this member of the shul and the chazan. Lokach yochel limchus, and therefore the individual is able to protest. The inanas shlucha l'tfilah bal korche, that we can't force this chazan to be his representative against the will of this individual. We can't force it on this community member. But if he just says, I hate this guy, I don't want him to be, then we don't ignore it. It's got to be that there's got to have been some historic feud between them that is known, not that he just turns around and says, I hate this guy. That doesn't work. Nun Zayin, Sifkat Nun Zayin, Koidem Shehiskim. What happens if the Chazan has been appointed, he's in place, and then they fall out, there's some sort of feud? In that situation, the individual is not able to protest. And the Shliach Tzibur has got to stand up and say, I am going to be moitzi this individual, even though he might hate me, I'm going to be moitzi him. And even if he says, you know what, I'm not going to be moitzi him, I'll be moitzi the rest of the whole community, but that guy who doesn't like me, I won't be moitzi him. Even the people that like him won't be yotze. Chazanim have got to be very careful to be moitzi everyone. The Shliach Tzibur, some sort of appointee of the Tzibur, can't flatter the community. He's got to stand up and give teichacha when he can. But in his own heart, he should be marvel al midaisav, he should be foregoing, and he should be beloved to the community. Take a look at 64. And the time of the Dova is quoting the Shevet Halevi, Rebozna, Sheshliach Tzibur hu shlucham v'kiblu akal al manas lahotzi es harab midei chavosam. If he has intention to not include some, al manas kain lo kibluhu. They didn't appoint him for that. They appointed him to be moitzi everyone. Ve'ena shliach shelohem. If you're able to explain, it's a pagam, it's a tremendous blemish on this shliach tzibur that he's being moitzi some and not all, and therefore his tefillah is not a tefillah, he says. Now, if you look at the last paragraph of his manenu and nowadays, she'ein hashatz moitzis rabbi dechova, kosav ha'orach shulchan shelo shaykh din zeh. This whole halacha doesn't apply. Commercial kosav mishnah berurah le'el le'inyan yochid sheroitz limnoa mishatz le'espalel. Because we're not being moitzi anybody, because nowadays, Baruch Hashem, individuals can read themselves and moitzi themselves in tefillah. Now, let's carry on. Sif Kotan Nun Ches, this is the last Mishnah Berurah on this Sif. Soine al umisha hu soine l'shliach tzibur lo ya'ala l'sefer Torah k'shekara teichacha. A very interesting halacha. That means that the Bal Korah, Rotzoloma, says the Mishnah Berurah, Kivan shu soine l'shatz, since he hates the Bal Korah, in this case, Mistoma hashatz gam kein ein oyavei. Well, Mistoma, presumably, the Shliach Tzibur, the Bal Korah, hates him as well. Kimayim ponim upon him. Sadly, it works two ways, the Pasuk says. If A hates B, B hates A. That's often the way it goes. So if this enemy comes up for the Aliyah, and then the Bal Korah says, perfect, I'm going to direct, if as it were, when I'm reading, I'm going to have this fellow in mind, and he will be the recipient of these curses, that's bad news. This is a danger involved. Al Kain Posuk, therefore he paskins that even if you call up this fellow, he shouldn't go up. Because if he goes up, the danger is the Golker will direct the Teichacha against him, and it's a danger, and therefore he should not be called up for the Aliyah. However, better he does go up, because being called up and not going up for the Aliyah is being mevazel Torah, and the Gemara says strong things against that. He should be beloved to the tzibur and he should love them. If he has a fallout and he has some sort of hatred towards a particular member in the community, again, it's the skan, i.e. the gaba, the shamas, or whatever who is calling someone up. He should make sure that you don't call him up because of the sakana. If they're worried, there's going to be a little bit of a plot over here. They're going to call up this guy so that he can be subject to these curses. You know what he should do? He should slip out of the shul so that they're unable to call him up, and then he'll come back in after they've called somebody else up and avoid being called up for the teichacha and for this potential concern that they're going to direct the teichacha towards him. He shouldn't miss any of laning, he should just nip out at the right time. And if he doesn't go out and they call him up, Ya'aleh, he should go up, says the Mishnah Berurah, because his intention is to give honor to the Torah and not to be mevazeh by refusing to go up. And shomer mitzvah lo yeda davara, and he's doing it as a mitzvah to give cover to the Torah, and shomer mitzvah, someone who keeps mitzvahs lo yeda davara will not know any bad. Okay. And the Golker should not have in mind any individual when he's reading these klolas. Because of even according to Magen Avraham, he should go up, but if they did call him up. Okay, we'll leave it there.